Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat. Let's all go to the lobby.
Hello and welcome to Movies vs. Capitalism, an anti-capitalist movie podcast. I am Frank.
And I'm Rivka.
And happy Super Bowl Sunday to you, Rivka.
You know I celebrate. You know me.
I know you. You love some football.
Love it. No, I feel blessed to be honest, like have raised in a home that never fucked with football. Not once. Not once.
I tried. My dad definitely tried with me, mostly with baseball. Sadly, baseball is the most boring sport, so I just did not take to it. But yeah, never.
Well, baseball's a little bit more tri-state area. You know what I mean? Like that makes a little more.
Yeah, I mean,
football,
there's baseball teams all over the
NFL.
country. America's pastime, it's been around for over 100 years.
I guess that's how Yankee centric.
Sure. And I should be clear for any of our audience members who do enjoy sports, professional sports.
Of course,
go off. Absolutely, I get it. I understand the draw of it. You know, it's theater for straight people. You know, you get the teams, the characters, the conflict, the resolution. I get it.
For
absolutely. Sure. But we are going to be talking about the Super Bowl today because a lot happened during this Super Bowl. Not the game. I don't know what the fuck happened in the game. I know that the Eagles won, so good for Philly. But yeah, we wanted to talk about Kendrick's performance because this has kind of been at the forefront of the cultural convo.
Everyone's water cooler. Yeah. I said everyone's water cooler.
Everyone's water cooler, for sure.
Forefront of cultural convo is more accurate.
No, I mean, they're one and the same. So, did you get a chance to watch Kendrick's performance?
I did. Just that.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just, yeah. And I didn't watch it live. So, yeah, I did. And then I've probably watched too many hours of discourse on it, which has been fascinating because there's so much to talk about. And I mean, straight off, I'll just say, like, always been a big Kendrick fan in terms of the music and the artistry, and I wasn't disappointed. I thought it was fucking great.
Sometimes the best message is the simplest message. You know what I mean? Or the best story is the simplest story. And I felt like this was an example of very simple, and I don't mean simple as in like, not complicated or stupid or dumb. Like, I mean simple as in like it was all very, very clear in the iconography he was using, in the staging he was using, in how his team and how the other performers were all situated and costumed and whatnot. It was I thought it was just a very clear.
The symbolism was clear, and there was so much of it that makes it so much fun to watch people unpack and pull up more, be it like the political messaging or the Drake, or just the straight up Drake messaging of it all. And that most of those have like double entendres, double meaning. I think both Frank and I agreed we're not going to get into all of the things because there's so much and so many other people who have done just like a great job doing that, of like all the details. But I was curious, I guess, like a big question that I found going around was like, yeah, but is this quote unquote radical? Is this revolutionary? Is this, he starts off the performance by saying
the revolution is about to be televised. You pick the right time, but the wrong guy.
And I'm curious your thoughts on, like, I've been resonating on, like, was that thesis statement played out?
Good question. I mean,
he put it there.
Yeah.
And I think that's what a lot of people are sort of like, there's a lot of discourse around that. And I don't know. I know I have some clear thoughts, and then other things that I'm like, there's a lot of contradiction. I think this was a fairly radical performance. I don't know if I would call this a revolutionary performance, because at the end of the day, still getting paid by the NFL or whoever foots the bill for the performance. Yeah. Was this a televised revolution? I don't know.
He wasn't saying anything. I mean, in my opinion, there wasn't anything said that hasn't already been said by other Black radicals, scholars for since for decades in this country. I do think it is very radical that he was given this stage, which is, don't get it twisted, the largest stage in this country, meaning like the Super Bowl on network television. More people watch the Super Bowl than any other event on television, in film, in theater, whatever, than anything else in the country every year, you know? So to choose this stage and this performance to mount a deeply political message, especially to a fandom that includes a lot of white conservative people, you know? Not to say that all people that watch football or watch the Super Bowl are white and conservative, but they were there for sure. They, you know, they watched, they got this message, and I know a lot of them were fucking pissed about it. So I thought it was a very worthwhile exercise in making a political statement, one that I wouldn't call necessarily revolutionary, but one that I thought was fairly radical, but also very needed for this moment.
Totally agree with all of that. And also agree that it must be said, and I think like those who are making these critiques, and it's like so important. I think one of the best like tweeted critiques I saw, I took a screenshot of it. Ocean the Great. When the backup dancer for Kendrick Lamar was tackled within seconds of holding up the flag for Palestine and Sudan, it was to show us all that during the performance, it was not the freedom of speech, liberation, and revolution we were being force-fed via K-Dot's art. It was to show us all that imperialism truly suppress the real truth and real life atrocities. If the Super Bowl was so revolutionary, the flag would have stayed up and Kendrick would have co-signed directly. So a really super important take. And that's referencing, I know we haven't gone there yet, but that's referencing that one of the backup dancers who was invited by, you know, Kendrick to perform made a decision to hold up a Palestinian flag that said "Free Sudan, Free Palestine," and was immediately tackled. Not immediately, got some good time, but of course it's not. I mean, if you watch it replayed, that's not in there. Was tackled by security pretty shortly after. And as far as I'm aware, Kendrick hasn't, like, there's been no, like, Kendrick hasn't mentioned that.
He hasn't given comment. I'm not sure. I didn't.
No, I don't think so. I don't think there's any been like. I don't think there's been, and maybe that'll change. I'm not holding my breath. I don't think so. I would be really happy to find out that changed, because I do think that's the limits of this shit, right? Like that is why. Yep. And it's you know, it's Beyonce, Black Bill Gates in the making, using the iconography of the Black Panthers in her Super Bowl performance. Like, those symbols are important to a movement, and also it's so important to recognize how capitalist industry co-ops all of that, and how it's actually a very useful tool for them as well. Just the dual awareness, the contradiction, right?
So after a really quick cursory search, it doesn't look like Kendrick has given a statement on the protester. So to speak to what you're saying, you know, as political and radical as this performance was, what would be really radical and revolutionary is for Kendrick to come out with a full-throated support of this protester and to speak in solidarity with the people of Gaza and Sudan and all oppressed people suffering at the hands of American imperialism all over the world. You know, there's a great interview with the protester, and forgive my pronunciation, Zulkarnain Nantambu, that they did with The Intercept, where they spoke at length about why they chose to do this. And he credited Kendrick because he said during rehearsals, Kendrick was talking about how revolutionary and radical this performance was meant to be, and how they are trying to spark conversation, spark change. And Nantambu internalized that as, oh, I have to use this moment and this platform to actually speak out.
Yeah.
Quoted them saying to themselves, are you going to be brave? Are you going to be a coward? Or are you going to take a stand?
And in interviews that I saw, I think a lot of that credit too is to their faith.
Yes.
From what I saw, it was just like deeply, deeply to their faith, and
yes, they're Muslim.
To their Muslim faith, yep. And of like, I have this I have a moral obligation to take it there.
Yeah, it was really powerful to see. And again, especially on that stage with this many viewers, it's something that needs to be reiterated constantly because it's not fucking over. It is not ended. It has just been constant and ongoing for 15, 16 months now.
I think it would be so deeply, deeply, because at the end of the day, like, you know, Kendrick is of the capitalist class.
Oh, yeah. He's of the bourgeoisie now, for sure.
And to be a traitor to that class would be to acknowledge this moment of that performance on top of all of the other brilliance that his performance brought. But like that was the revolution televised, and they're trying to censor it now. Just like if he let it in letting that slip says a fucking lot, right? Because that's ultimately choosing, you know, there's a lot to fucking lose because we know there's consequences to the whole, and this was what was so brilliant about the performance, like just the staging of we're playing a game, the game that Black Americans are meant to play, the game that we're all playing inside of this PlayStation, you know, prison yard system, and yet I'm with you that the symbolism was there, and sometimes I'm like, can we say the game? Can we say the game of capital? Mm-hmm. Can you point out when the game is being played right in the middle of your performance? Like sometimes I think that's not, because we know that aspect of the game being played is going to be erased. It's erased. You can't see it unless you're on social media. Like it's not being played as part of his performance. It was erased.
Big time. And it really underscores how much of a third rail Israel and Gaza is politically right now, and has always been, but especially right now, where Kendrick is clearly comfortable giving this performance about the historical exploitation, subjugation, enslavement of Black people, how Black people built this country, but there aren't any professional repercussions for voicing that message, because that is a message that we are all that we have heard and we are comfortable with and we understand. And whether you're like a white, and as long as you're not a white racist, one that you probably agree with, but how Gaza specifically is just something that these fucking celebrities are unwilling to touch, except for Macklemore.
Yeah, let's go there right after this. I mean, and I will say, like, obviously part of the contradiction here is being aware of like under Trump and like how, you know, I think what is so great about this is that like giving voice to these ideas in a place where this is like, you know, 40 acres and a mule being erased. I mean, how quickly all of this that seems so evident to us now is being erased from like education just like so quickly evaporating, and how quickly like there is that level where it's very, very real, and that is revolutionary. And also for a capitalist class, like you said, they're gonna allow this to be aired. They're not gonna allow the protester with the flag to be aired, and we need to clock that. Yeah. And who is they? You can symbolize it all you want, but until you call it out. Now let's talk about an artist who called it the fuck out.
Who would have thought? Who would have thought we'd be here in 2020?
Not on my bingo card.
2024 and 2025.
Thrift shop?
Looking at Macklemore being like, damn, he's the bravest one of all of them. That's crazy.
Yeah, so Macklemore 2 hours ago? Or not 2 hours ago as of now, but when you texted, you're like 2 hours ago this
Earlier
dropped.
Today, yes.
Yeah, by the time you hear it. But Frank sent me... What is the song called? No, I was just like blown away when you sent it. I was like, oh, what? And this isn't the first. I mean, Macklemore wrote Hins Hall.
The song is called Fucked Up.
Now, this is not like, I can't even get into comparing, obviously, like Macklemore versus Kendrick as like a rapper.
No, we're not doing that. We're not doing that.
Please.
We're not comparing them as rappers. Honestly, I don't even really want to compare them in terms of like what they are willing to say or risk politically, although I guess we just did a little bit, but like
I will. I don't.
But they're coming from different vantage points, obviously. You know, Kendrick as a Black person, Macklemore as a white person. So Macklemore does get to come in with a little bit more of, and you know, he is on the outside right now of pop culture, of the industry. So he does get to come in with a little bit more of like, I'm a white guy. I do have like these politics, but I'm comfortable saying
or even more so that being a white guy, but also he positioned himself as an independent artist. He's not he's not on a label other than his own. Like, he has also positioned himself as far as like the peripheral research I've done, like that's kind of been the thing. And so when you're not positioned to also be on a big capitalist label like that, you get to say shit. Like, you know what I mean? Like, he's not gonna get dropped from his label because he is his label, as far as I know. But I mean, just in terms of relationship to capital, I think we've seen this evolution of Macklemore. I mean, with Hinds Hall, like you said, taking on those repercussions of, I'm gonna fucking say it, you know?
Absolutely.
And in this music video, everyone should watch it. In this song, I mean, the music video is the most powerful fucking part. And like, there's so many elements, but I think just to this point of like naming whose game you're playing, he calls out Apple. He calls out Google. He has their Netflix, who, like, all the fucking people that you're like, yeah, they it's advantageous for them for people to talk symbolically. They don't want you putting that shit there. They don't want you fucking talking about Israel, like saying the fucking thing, and he names it all in this. And that was like, oof, I have chills for that. That's some of the bravest shit I've seen from an artist in a while.
Oh,
like,
big
even
time. Beyond
just a flag, you're like, you just named. I mean, he's got the fucking oligarchy's faces all over. There's no, this is like, there's no symbolism.
No, there's no symbolism. It's all in the text. It is all very much in the text.
And paired together, these performances back to back is like a powerhouse.
No, you're so right in that, like, Kendrick's proximity to capital, and as a capitalist himself, and the system and the bourgeoisie, it creates this self-imposed limit on what he is willing to do or say. Whereas Macklemore is very much on the outside of the system right now, so feels at least that he has this more political freedom to speak out. I guess what I was just trying to say earlier is that he does have the privilege of a white guy, knowing that he's not going to be torn down in the same way that Kendrick potentially could for being more radical than he already is, if that makes sense.
Totally. Yeah, totally. There's always those complexities.
Mm-hmm. A lot of complexities.
But in terms of what he has to lose,
yeah, and big time, so much. The most of many modern artists today.
I mean, I saw that music video. I was like, I'm a little scared for that man.
For
Macklemore. Not just like where I was like, I can't remember. I don't know the last time I've seen something that was like that clear.
Yeah.
In terms of like that popular, like, because this was like we said, thrift shop. Like, in terms of a popular artist,
Yep.
whatever you think of his music, but with that reach, like particularly like the audience who I remember like loving Macklemore.
Yeah, if anything happens to Macklemore in the next several months or years, it was definitely the CIA. I'm saying that right now.
But also doesn't have the reach. You know, he's not going to be given the platform of the NFL, but he does I mean, it's a brave, go out, watch that music video. I'm going to are we good on this? Can I take a hard right? Or let's say a hard left. Why would I take a hard right?
Yeah, don't ever take a hard right.
Can I take a hard left, or did you want to say anything else on this?
No, that was it.
Music topic. We'll talk later about how Bad Bunny plays into all of this, because that's my personal.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Wow. Yeah, we can do that.
Wow. But there's a lot of like, you know, quote unquote radical music right now that has many contradictions. But I just want to share, because it's going to come up in this episode. So I'm officially going to share with our audience that red diaper baby on the way.
Yeah.
I'm pregnant. Yeah.
That's it. Wow.
My life's about to change.
And your life will never be the same.
And my life will never be the same.
Yes.
So
we're having a baby. The royal MVC team. We're so excited.
I'll start talking about it. So now I'm gonna, like, we've done some episodes that we recorded, and I'm like, I gotta share it officially. But you'll start hearing it come up, and it's definitely gonna change the way I see things, I'm sure.
Oh, I'm sure it will.
Already has. It's a wild experience. So I'm doing a few months. We'll see how that affects our scheduling, but I'm happy to share it with you all. My due date is May 7th. I don't know if that's going to happen, but I'm excited to share with the MVC family that May 5th is Karl Marx's birthday. Mm-hmm. May 6th, Luigi Mangione was born. So we're hoping for May 7th, because I think that's a good slot.
That's a good slot. Honestly, if she lands anywhere in there, it'll be great. No, I'm so excited for you and Tommy. When you told me a few months ago, I was so elated, truly. And
Frank cried.
I did. I cried.
It's very sweet.
And all of our friends in our community are so excited. A bunch of people are coming to town soon for the baby shower. It's going to be a joyous celebration of life. And you're going to be a great mom.
And I will probably feel like we're talking the substance today, but Elizabeth Sparkle at the end of the movie.
That's, yeah, I'm sure. Yeah.
But everyone else enjoy. So you'll hear more about this, but let's get to that convo because it's a good one today.
So now that you know that Riv is expecting, this would be a great time for you to become a Patreon supporter for this podcast because we don't sell ads. We rely on you, our community.
We sell babies.
Yep. So if you want to support us, you can do that by subscribing to our Patreon.
That's right. For just $5 a month. I can't even believe it. You get access to new bonus episodes, also our entire back catalog, of which there are a lot of really good options. Our Patreon link is in the episode description in your podcast player or at mvcpod.com. Also, make sure to rate, review, subscribe to this podcast on your podcast player so you don't miss new episodes and so other people can find us and have a radicalizing experience just like you through film.
Also, just a reminder that because we don't sell ads, we donate our ad space. So if you are part of a leftist or progressive organization and you would like to run an ad with us, you can email us at moviesvscapitalism@gmail.com.
Okay, we are going to take a short break and we will be right back with our conversation about The Substance with Kate Eastman.
Hey everyone, it's Frank here. So after the devastating wildfires in Los Angeles, Rivka and I just wanted to take a moment in this mid-roll spot to direct you to some online resources if you would like to contribute to the relief effort. Honestly, there are so many different organizations doing incredible grassroots organizing on the ground. It would be impossible to name all of them, but the Mutual Aid Los Angeles network has done an incredible job of putting together a massive list of all of the different places where you can help out. And you can find that list by going to mutualaidla.org. That's mutualaidla.org. They have a bunch of different opportunities from donating to volunteering. If you're able to help out in any way, this is going to be a long recovery for the people affected by these fires in LA. All right, everyone, stay safe. And now back to the show. Today we are joined once again by Kate Eastman. Kate is an actor. She's appeared in recurring roles in the series Archive 81 on Netflix and in Dark Matter on Apple TV, as well as guest spots in American Horror Stories, Leverage Redemption, and others. Her film credits include the upcoming Nonnas. Well, I'm just going to take a pause and say I'm interested in that as an Italian person. Maestro, and the short film Damage, which you can find on YouTube, and of which she is very proud. Recent favorite reads include Mutiny by Peter Martins and A Prayer for the Crowned Shy by Becky Chambers. She is in her cinephile era and is thinking about becoming a therapist. Wow. Thank you for sharing, Kate, and welcome back to the show.
Thanks for having me back. I'm Kate Eastman, and I'm the oldest I'll ever be. Or will ever be? No, I'm the oldest I've ever been.
Ever been,
yeah.
Ever be. I was like,
yeah.
Do we have an announcement?
And then I die on air.
Our show suddenly blows up.
Kate, I did not know that you were in Maestro, and then I was watching Maestro, and I was like, holy shit, that's Kate.
Yeah, that's kind of the state of my acting career right now. It's like
holy shit, that's
it's like
Kate
you're watching.
moments?
It's like you're watching a thing, and then you're like, hey. Yeah. But I don't move the plot forward in any way whatsoever.
I mean, if you were to star in a sitcom, it would have to be holy shit, it's Kate.
Oh my god. Thank you so much. I want Julio Torres to write it.
Totally. I mean, it's an anti-capitalist sitcom. It's just like a fun.
Yeah.
It's a fun witty title.
Weird.
Pulls us in.
Riv, have you seen Problemista?
What was that?
Problemista?
Oh, I did on a plane. That's
Okay.
why I was like, yeah, I did, but it was so small because it was on a plane.
I love watching movies that are really not meant for planes on planes.
It's a predicament, yeah, because it's not the ideal size, but I just find my focus, like there is something, everything I've seen on a plane is like unforgettable. And even reading too, you know, when you like, there's just, when I'm emotionally breaking down on a plane, it hits. Like the right book or like whatever, and you're just like, is there anyone else? And you're trying to find other people watching it. It's like, yeah.
I saw the TV Glow on the plane ride home
Still need
in
to watch
December.
that.
Oh my God. I was having like a religious experience, you know, crying, processing my relationships. And, you know, I always love doing that on a plane next to strangers.
It's the best place. It's the best place.
I've heard maybe just like on the internet, but that there is something that happens to you at that altitude that emotionally you are like chemically and emotionally you're in a different place.
That makes sense.
This is not journalism. This is just this is
I
just
would also
this
assume
is
the proximity
hearsay.
to, I mean, like, you try, but like you can't deny I mean, who's not up there on some part of their brain like, I'm in the sky. I could die. I'm existential as fuck.
Based on what you're both saying, I do feel like there's something to the fact that you are more able to surrender fully to another world because you don't want to be constantly present with the fact that you're hurtling through the air in a tin can.
Yeah. And you're just in so much discomfort because of how they treat you. And you're just like, I have to focus on something else. Laser. Kate is doing... She's putting her hands to the sides of her face as if she's like looking through a tunnel. This is an audio medium.
You know when you put blinders on horses, like
yes.
the little the little things that cover the side of their eyes, so that they don't, so that their field of vision is narrowed, so that they don't spook, basically.
Yeah.
Oh, I did not know that. Okay, good.
Has there ever been a play done in the air on a plane?
My brain was like about horses, and I was like, Equus.
Has Equus ever, specifically,
has Equus ever been done on a plane?
Is there a play set in a plane? I don't know. That'd be a very good one. I mean, it's a one setting. You know,
I saw a
lends
truly
itself.
horrific episode of a reality television show, where the premise is that the wife gives the husband. Or the pre-wife gives the pre-husband all of the responsibility for planning the wedding. Mm-hmm. And it's inevitably a disaster because the husbands are inevitably thoughtless and don't take the day as seriously as the wife. And I saw one where he was like, and it's British.
Yes.
I saw one where he was like, I thought it'd be brilliant if we got married on a plane. And so he like herded her whole family onto a plane, and they were like, oh, this is so exciting. It's a destination wedding. And then the plane just circled the airport, and he compelled her to marry him in front of all her family in the tiny confines of a plane. And now he's dead because she murdered him.
That's brilliant. That's actually brilliant. Like, what a brilliant episode of reality TV. There's so much there.
Yeah.
That does sound like my nightmare, though. Getting married on a plane.
But an apt metaphor for some kinds of marriage in our society.
Well, Kate, our listeners might remember you from our Princess Mononoke episode we did, I don't even remember how many months back, but if you haven't heard that episode, go listen to it. And Rivka and I were like, we have to have Kate back because we had such a fun time chatting with you, and we were kicking around ideas, and we landed on the movie that we're going to be talking about today. So thank you.
Yeah, that's right. We are going to be talking about The Substance.
And this is where you put that the sting of that, like, from the soundtrack.
Yeah. Just yeah.
If you, I'm guessing a lot of you have probably seen it. I feel like it was a smash hit from 2024. A lot of people saw it. This film is written, directed, co-edited, and co-produced by, I believe the pronunciation, please help me here, is Coralie Farget. Is that the French pronunciation?
I think that's right.
You're definitely trying your best. So we can give you credit for that.
Thank you. Okay. This movie stars Demi Moore,
Margaret Qualley, and Dennis Quaid, and a few other actors, but very few. Which it's like a very small cast. This film was made for approximately $7.5 million, and so far has had a box office of $76.5 million. And, super short synopsis. This is a movie about Elizabeth Sparkle, played by Demi Moore, an actress renowned for an aerobics show, facing a devastating blow on her 50th birthday as her boss Harvey, played by Dennis Quaid, fires her. And amid her distress, a secret laboratory, offers her a substance which promises to transform her into an enhanced version of herself, played by Margaret Qualley. And horror, comedy, lots of feelings follow.
And if you are listening to this in the future, this movie premiered in, as we mentioned, 2024 on May 19th at Cannes, Festival de Cannes in Cannes, I think is where they have it, where Farge won Best Screenplay. So a little bit of the historical context. What was going on around this time in 2024. It was Brat Summer after Charli XCX's album became a pop sensation, along with Chappell Roan's rise in popularity. And of course, 2024 became the year of the billionaire pop star Taylor Swift, with the Eras Tour dominating headlines and setting records.
I know you said in the future, but can we just take a moment? That feels like fucking forever ago as you're saying it. At least for me, I'm
yeah.
As we're sitting here, all of us on the East Coast in the depths of winter on January 22nd recording this, I'm like, continue. But I'm like, could be a decade ago.
It is not transformed into a brat winter. We are not having one.
No, unfortunately not. Well, depending on who you are, I suppose.
Also happening in 2024, we entered into the new year as Israel continued its genocide in Gaza, resulting in a growing Free Palestine movement in the U.S., on college campuses, and around the world. Donald Trump was almost assassinated. Joe Biden stepped down as the Democratic nominee for president. Kamala Harris stepped in, then spent the entire campaign paying hollow lip service to her base and campaigning with Liz Cheney, resulting in Trump's re-election as president. And in November, Luigi Mangione allegedly assassinated Brian Thompson, the CEO of United Healthcare, in a politically motivated killing that set off a public debate over the murderous U.S. healthcare industry. Also, Drake and Kendrick Lamar got in a fight.
In case you needed further context.
So, Kate, usually we start the conversation asking our guest, why did you pick this movie for us to watch? We specifically reached out to you and were like, do you want to talk about the substance? So I guess I'll start with asking, what was your first reaction when you first watched, and how many times have you watched it so far? One or two?
One.
Okay, so what was your takeaway on a first watch?
Yeah, it's interesting. I was going to watch it again. That was part of my to-do for my research. And I kept avoiding it. And initially I was like beating myself up about that. But then I just got curious about it. I was like, why don't you want to do that again? Mm-hmm. And with Mononoke, it was very easy for me to just get really granular because it's one of my favorite movies. I know exactly how I feel about it. It continuously reveals new things to me and speaks to me at whatever phase of my life I'm in. And so it was easy to deep dive based on my current interests and my long history with the movie because I had no uncertainty about its meaning to me and about Miyazaki and about what I wanted to say. But my research with this movie wound up being just me spending a long time parsing my feelings about it. My initial response to it was like, I had a lot of sometimes catharsis is like sobbing. I didn't have that kind of release, but I had I almost felt like I was like one of the Furies watching something. Like there was this very Dionysian, like, yeah, watching it. Like an expulsion of intense hatreds.
Ooh.
And I thought that the final sequence was brilliant and such a huge release for me as an audience member, and obviously in the movie as well. But I felt, yeah, when I went to watch it again, I was like, I don't want to do this again. And I was like, that's interesting, Kate. What's that about? Yeah. And so I've just spent the time since you asked me to if I wanted to do this podcast episode to now unpacking the weird complicatedness of that. But my first responses were like, oh, and and oh. I was sitting next to, I went with my manager who hates horror movies. And I fuck specifically with certain horror movies, and with other horror movies, I'm like, it's not for me. Mm-hmm. And this was definitely a horror movie for me. Body horror specifically, I'm like, wow, that's a genre for women and queer people. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I sat next to this guy and I had this very vocal early reaction to something, I think her spine splitting open, her back splitting open.
Yeah. And
I made a noise. And that like gave the guy next to me permission to make noises. And so the two of us were kind of just like speaking to each other through our yells for the entire screening. And it was a really thrilling theatrical experiences because the theater was wigging out. Like people in the audience were yelling. And I love that. I think that's so fucking cool when a movie can draw a real response from our repressed intellectual New York audience.
That's such a good, I want to dig in all that, but I do agree that New York is a repressed audience. I went to a dance show on Saturday night by myself because I just wanted to like dance, and no one was fucking dancing. No one was dancing. It was a concert. It was like a dance pop group, dance music, and everyone's just like standing kind of sweat. I'm like, fuck all of you, too cool. This is bullshit. And whatever. That's a diversion. But
Frank, if you know you want to dance at a dance band, just invite me, because I do not give a fuck, and I will dance around.
Oh,
I was dancing. Like
great,
I was,
great.
Yeah.
But you won't need to be alone in that. Is what I'm saying. You can actually you can actually like commune with another person and the
thank
music.
You so much. Yes.
Yeah, dude.
Yeah, I will hit you up for that. I totally understand the impulse of not wanting to watch it again, because I loved my first viewing experience of this at the movie theater with a big crowd as the hype was still building. As you're saying, it was just like off the walls. Everyone's just, groaning, screaming, blah, like making all the sounds. Sitting down to watch it again, I was like, oh, I don't want to watch this. And like, I made my way through it for the sake of research and
for science.
For science. But I think it's one of those movies where once you know where it is going and once you know what happens and you know the plot and you know the sort of visual shock you're going to encounter, then on a second watch, it was kind of like, oh, well, yeah, now I'm just like watching this tortuous body horror, which I like. And don't get me wrong, I thought this movie was like brilliant and I loved it. But on a second go around, I was like, it's just not as... Because I know where it's going, I don't feel like I need to watch this again, if that makes sense.
Yeah, all of that resonates so much. What you were saying, Kate and Frank, as well. I watched it a second time. I never got the experience in a theater because, which I think by the time this episode airs, I'll have shared with our audience. I'll make sure to have. But I'm pregnant, so I'm expecting in May. And this was like in the thank you, and which they both know. But I'm sure audience for the first time, if you didn't hear whatever whenever sharing, I'll do it. But I was like deep in the throes of just the worst first try. Like my friends couldn't say foods. I'd be like, no. I couldn't hear. It was so strange. So everyone was like, you're going to love The Substance. You cannot watch it now. You're going to love The Substance. You cannot watch it now. I was like, damn. Because I was on my way and they're like, please don't go. Which was a good call. I don't think it was, and not even the body horror stuff. It was more the food. The food horror would have really just not been the moment for me. But I'm with you, Frank. On my second rewatch, even though both times were at home, there was no, when you sometimes certain films you rewatch and you're like, it gives me something new. It didn't. And I don't think that's necessarily like a problem with the movie. I think to what you're both getting at, it is meant to be a visceral, full-bodied experience, like getting on a roller coaster that like expecting some of the gags, the bits, and sort of where it comes to, you're just not going to have that same thing happen again. So I was reflecting a lot on my first time, but it was nice to get a refresher of points, but I didn't feel like, oh, I'm totally seeing something new here. So Kate, I think you're and it is interesting, like all the reasons. Yeah, I also found myself having resistance to sitting down to watch it again. And I think all those reasons are exactly why it has something to say as a movie.
Yes. And I also want to say that like it's a brilliantly made film. Mm-hmm. And I think Coralie Farge did exactly what she set out to do, and she did it brilliantly. And on this podcast, I am interested in discussing my feelings and opinions about the film, which are neither right nor wrong. They just are. Mm-hmm. And the film itself is brilliant because I am digging through the layers of my reactions, and I only do that for a movie that's really good.
Yeah.
I just want to bookend that with like, I just hate when discussions of film become like film good or bad.
Right.
When actually like in honor of David Lynch, the whole point of making a movie is to be in conversation with it. Mm-hmm. And like, I don't necessarily want to hear what Coralie has to say about her movie. I want to talk to her movie. Eraserhead is his most spiritual film. Expand on that. No, I won't,
I love that you said that because I feel so often, and we talk about this a lot, that like the concept of criticism people back away from because they feel it immediately equates film good or bad. Like that's what we're talking about. And I've noticed even more in our conversations and how we kind of are looking at things. It's like, yeah, I can start to recognize my opinions versus like, this is a critique for the sake of looking at a political point, like what it's putting out in the world in terms of this. And it's kind of a joy when it's like those things clash, and people so often are afraid, oh my God, it's going to ruin the thing for me. And I just, part of this project is expanding. Can we hold like the multiplicity of all the things? And also sometimes if it ruins it, maybe that's okay. Like we're on a journey with the thing.
It's also like, or I think often for me, the fear is like, I always want to honor the incredible and insane work that goes into making a movie.
Yep.
Oh, yeah.
And
especially something like this that has so much practical effects, so much choreography. Everything that they went through to make this movie, like the fact that for the scene when the audience is getting drenched in blood, that she put on the Monstro Elisa suit, Coralie. And really?
Yes, she put on that Monstro Elisa suit prosthetic so that she could have the rig, her hand in the rig that was shooting literally a fire hose of blood at the audience. Like I read this great little bit of an interview where one of the tech people on the film, the special effects people, was like, yes, fire hose of blood. What a great metaphor for the effects she wants to have. And no, she was like, no, I want a literal fire hose of blood. And and that's so metal. And yeah, she was holding the camera for that shot because it's a POV shot from Monster Elisa Sue's perspective. And so that was her. Like that she is willing
so
to,
cool.
that she is willing to get so deeply inside of the process of making the movie. And I always want to honor that. And then the discussion about the film is this separate thing. And my horror is always that it will be somehow construed as disrespect. Because I do have some pretty pointed thoughts about like what the movie is about and how it intersects with like my ever evolving politics. And since this is a Marxist podcast, and the question at the end is like, is this movie anti-capitalist? It's not a Marxist podcast. I'm a Marxist. It's an anti-capitalist podcast. And the question at the end of the podcast is always, is this movie anti-capitalist? I am an anti-capitalist. So of course I'm looking at it through that lens. And I don't know Coralie's politics. I do know that she started a collective of female filmmakers in France because of the gatekeeping that goes on with the male film community. And so she basically amassed literally a collective of female filmmakers, and they all read, edited, watched, helped develop each other's work without this patriarchal pressure for it to be what it was not.
Fuck yeah.
So she clearly has like a radical collectivist muscle in her, and that is a place where her interest lies. But I do think the film is like very white feminist in ways that she is maybe not so keyed into or doesn't care about. But I also, that's a really intense thing to say. And I don't know a more elegant or egalitarian way to say it. Like I want to discuss where I felt, no, stop talking to me. I wanted to discuss where I felt like left out of it. But I also don't want to put her down or put down this feat of filmmaking that she undertook.
I think that's a beautiful thing to say, and I will say that I feel like that comes up every time I talk about a movie. And also just not only and it kind of actually aligns with the themes of this, like recognizing the artist in all of the people who put this work is recognizing the artist in me. And like, what does that mean to the creative process? And just, learning more about how critique is also part of the creative process. And I think learning how to talk about these films critically actually has helped me be a better artist in some ways, because recognizing exactly what you just said of like, I can have some of these epiphanies and it's not, and they don't have, I mean, certainly critique happens with massive disrespect. We see it all the time and used as a tool of violence, blah, 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 blah. Yeah. But it can also be this other thing that we're exploring here that maybe sometimes we hit or miss. But I appreciate you naming that, because it is a feeling that comes up. And yet I think it's so rich to explore it regardless of that feeling, because I do think so much fear around not critiquing things doesn't allow us to, I've just seen it in myself also, where I'm like, I don't want to say the thing that I'm really thinking because I'm afraid of disrespecting probably more so myself as a creative than even the person, I'm afraid of what it might mean.
Yes. And then because no one is saying what they mean, misunderstanding happens, and then assumptions happen, and then divide happens. Like Rivka and I are in this same group of theater workers that read Capital together. We talked about it a little bit on the last podcast. But we are in our next phase as a group of like figuring out what we want to do. And our, the group organizer gave us an article, a handbook. And no, he called it an article, but homie, it was a book. It was a 72 page
and Kate said
book.
That. I love that. You're like, yeah, I'd say it's a book.
I was like, I see article. I'm like, oh great, I can read this article the day before we meet. I open it up. It's a 72-page book.
I suppose when you finish reading Capital, you're like, compared to Capital, it's an article.
Also, I think that's just one of my points of tension in the group always, is that I read much slower than a lot of the people in the group. But anyway, this article is called Constructive Criticism, a handbook. It's in the title. It's a book. But it lays out this, and you can find it for free on Marxist.org or Marxism.org, but y'all should link it in the episode notes. It really lays out a way to be in conversation with other people and with yourself, running critique of your behavior and of the behavior of the people around you. And not really, behavior is the wrong word, but it's basically how to constantly be tracking whether or not everyone is understanding each other. And then when you run up against conflict, to navigate that conflict without causing harm, basically. Mm-hmm. And not in the sort of like eggshelly way, but just in the, we need to figure out if we still align. Like, that's it. And if we don't align, that's peace be with you. But we're not going to get work done together. So yeah, this concept of like unity, struggle, unity, like that is the function of critique. But in our society, critique is like another form of entertainment. Like, you want to hear people say nasty things, or you want to see something elevated to the height of the gods. But there's no space for critique and study of our evolving ideology, of like the engine on which our culture is running.
For the dialectic.
For the dialectic,
exactly.
Yes.
And I love everything you both are saying. I can't relate because I am a man, so I feel comfortable saying anything at any time.
Yes. And that's your birthright.
Never once second guessed myself ever.
I was just going to say, yes, I love all of that. I love that this is the lens through which we're diving into talking about this movie. Because honestly, it was a lot of like you were saying it, that like a lot of it had to do with the movie, but it did such an incredible job of bringing up so many core themes of my own personal life, of the patriarchy, of capitalism, of the intersection of classism, of racism, whether it's because it wasn't in there, deliberately not in there, whatever, but like all the things that were swirling. And I was grateful that I had done a lot of like this kind of self-critique through different recovery work myself at this stage of seeing this, because I was having a lot of like self-compassion, thinking like, whew, to encounter a movie like this in the throes of this horror, which I have been in. Like, I very much related this to a lot of my 20s, a lot of my eating disorder recovery, like just a lot of what I have like actually physically experienced. It was just, I was just thinking about what would it have been like to see this in the throes of that. I imagine, I don't know, my imagination was like either not being able to see it, or at some point it all clicking later, or it being like a real awakening. I don't know, but I just was grateful to see it at this point where I sort of had a little, I mean, it's constantly there, but being, I would say for myself, feeling like I'm out of the throes of the like physical horror. Because when you go through something like, I'll speak for myself, for bulimia, you're like, this actually wasn't that, like, to be honest, I was like, this, and I'm with you, Kate, this is my kind of horror, not all horror is. And I love the catharsis, but it was cathartic because I was like, yeah, it's not something I haven't faced or seen. And the brutality of the majority of the beauty industry, obviously there's a range, but particularly if you've ever encountered bulimia, it will take you there. It is not, what happens behind closed doors is literally that brutal. And refacing, you know, I threw up so much during my first trimester, and it was such a different, you know, it was not something that I was I mean, you're never in control of it, which is a theme of this film, but it was a totally different experience. It was my body literally doing it to bring life here, and, you know, a totally different thing. It was like I had that experience that time, and one time also doing mushrooms, where I came face to face with just like how physically, what a physical assault it is. And I think this is one of I was so appreciative of the film, of just like the raw brutality and sort of the simplicity of theme. Like, it wasn't something happening with so many other things happening. It was like, this is what we're talking about.
Yeah.
The raw brutality of the beauty industry, of capitalism, of the patriarchy, and what it does to particularly the female body, but also the male body, as I think is alluded to with the other character who gives her the substance.
I did want to ask you both, because obviously, you know, as a male presenting person in this world, I am watching this through the but someone who has, you know, taken time to learn about these systems, particularly capitalism, patriarchy, how they intersect with one another to oppress. But I'm curious, speaking with both of you, as to like female presenting actors who have both worked in the entertainment industry. And this is also very much a movie about Hollywood and the entertainment industry specifically, as well as like the beauty industry. Do you feel like this maybe resonated more with you two because you both had the experience as actors who have worked in the industry? Do you feel like there are maybe things that might have been missed on women who have never worked as an actor? Obviously, this movie was incredibly even though obviously this movie has been incredibly resonant with women. So, yeah.
Yeah, yes. But so it's, man, there's so much in what both of you are saying and what you were saying, Rivka. Because, yeah, I think this movie is about, like, horror functions, good horror externalizes in operatic scale the feelings that we don't want to face. And I think that, and which is why it's cathartic, or can be. And I know a lot of, like, I read some criticism of the film, and I think like 5 years ago, I would have watched this film and it would have been something that I hated, like outright, because its subject matter is, I think, self-hatred and the compulsions that arise from trying to numb self-hatred. So like, it is about a kind of addiction, and, you know, people get addicted to plastic surgery in real life. So it's like, it's not even that far from things that really happen, and people who but also this is hairy territory, because plastic surgery is life-saving for whole segments of the population.
Sure.
So it's like this was one of the things that I was parsing as I was sitting with my feelings, because like a lot, and it's less to do with the film itself and more to do with the conversation around the film, calling it like a feminist masterpiece, blah, blah, blah. But what it really is it's about a specific kind of woman who is attractive in a way that can be a woman who has the soft power of extreme idealized attractiveness. Like, my experience in the industry is I have only ever been able to trade. I've been able to trade with mild success on the way that I look. But I've never been smaller than a size 6. And as I get older, I'm not a size 6 anymore. And the industry is changing, but not in the like stratospheric heights of it. That is still a place that is dominated by the thin, white, Eurocentric beauty standard. And this is a movie about the horror of once being able to trade on the thin, white, Eurocentric beauty standard and then not being able to anymore. Because you have aged out. And that is actually an experience of a narrow part of the population, an exceedingly narrow part of the population.
Is that part of you, like you had mentioned the white feminist critique? Is that kind of where you're landing with this?
Yeah, it's that. And it's also like, I was reading about Coralie's, like the genesis of the movie. And she said she wrote it in her early 40s when she was navigating very intense feelings of like self-hatred about the fact that her appearance was changing and she was like not going to be relevant anymore, because you look at Coralie and she is thin, she is beautiful, in a very Eurocentric standard way. And so she is someone who's had, I think, maybe the experience of trading on that in the world, in her professional and possibly personal lives. And these are huge assumptions. So I'm not necessarily talking about the real Coralie. I'm talking about someone who is navigating the entertainment industry, which is a highly superficial business in many ways, and who is maybe despairing of ever getting where she wants to go in the entertainment industry because she's not going to be hot anymore. And I get it. I have struggled with the same shit. And I think the anti-capitalist lens on that shit is to be like, why do I care so much? Why am I expending so much energy to retain power in a hierarchy? Why am I not spending that energy to dismantle the hierarchy? And again, I don't know Coralie's politics, but the fact that this movie has a lot of empathy for the monster at the end, which I love. I had such tenderness for that monster. But it does not have a lot of empathy for Elizabeth or Sue. It has moments of it, but mostly we just watch them get really brutalized or objectified. And the camera objectifies them really intensely. One of the things I love, though, is how, like, especially in the Sue's workout video scenes, how the camera is like so intensely cold, male gaze, body as meat, body as plastic.
Yes.
And like pop star music video intentionally. And it's doing that. It's like, it's sedating you with this drug of perfect body. And then she subverts it by like something disgusting coming out of the hip, you know, like that great moment when Sue is like utterly panicked because her body is starting to fall apart because she's been abusing the drug. And like, I love the subversion of that male gaze, and I love all of those subversive elements, but ultimately the characters just suffer, and Elizabeth dies staring up, comforting herself with the delusion of adoration. But she has never actually known real love, because anyone who had ever actually known real love would not want the things that she wants, and would not stay locked in a cycle of self-harm the way she is. But like she's only ever known shallow adoration, and that is what she thinks love is, and so that is what she is chasing. And I didn't get the sense, I mean, maybe the movie does understand that, and that's why the ending is so sad. I found the ending very sad.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Again, I can't know completely what the film's intent was, but I struggle with movies that are so nihilistic, and that are and I struggle with movies that brutalize their subjects unrelentingly.
Yeah.
And this movie is nihilistic and does brutalize the subject, but it's also a movie about self-hatred. And she said that she wrote it to like express those feelings in a pure way. So I think that she achieved her goal. It's just like, okay, what is it doing? Are you trying to show people who are not who are not like you, what it is to be a woman in an attractive female body, hunted, always on edge, hyper vigilant, no sense of self, no authentic sense of self? Are you showing that because you hope to invoke empathy? If so, why are you're using so many distancing tactics in the movie? And why are you continuously pushing the audience away with brutality and gore and disgusting elements. Like it's just, it's interesting. I'm like, why this movie? But I'm also someone who loves the slowest movies imaginable. I love movies with like long shots of the sky or a really long shot of the ocean, just doing its thing. So like in some ways, this movie is like the opposite of the kind of movie that truly like sings to me as an artist. And I acknowledge that.
Yeah, totally. You said so much.
I know, I talked for such a long time.
No, I love it. There was so much stuff there that
it was so cogent.
That I appreciated.
It was beautiful.
Yeah, and I love that we're starting at like just talking straight up about the class, race, and the positioning of Elizabeth and Sue. And that was actually, and this kind of is to your question too, Frank, like that was the part that I sort of felt like was where we need to, the messaging for me in terms of capitalism, in terms of power, in terms of the trickle down of all of this, the intentional trickle down, it just made me think about, like, I have a memory of this self-hate coming into my awareness at the age of fucking 4 years old.
Yeah.
And I will say, and this isn't what you were saying, Kate, but I'll say, like, no matter how much love there, and there's so much, and it combated so much, the love, the family, like the true culture that I was also getting to combat this Hollywood stuff, that came directly from my media sources. It's so powerful. That came directly from Hollywood, directly from, and to me, this film was just how, I think it was important that she was an actress, and I loved how isolated it was on this particular experience, because I think what it was showcasing, and I liked the discipline that the director had to keep it so isolated. It wasn't about the connection to the other world. It was like the isolation, we're seeing this, but we're not seeing any of the glitz and glamour that we get in Kardashians, the reality, the ways that we're so used to seeing this characterized as Capital puts it up on a pedestal for us in a desirable way. There was nothing, like you were saying, desirable about what Elizabeth even started with. There wasn't really, we're like, what is there to lose? And yet, like, I just recognized all the scars, all the wounds of, like, a child who probably had hated themselves since 4 already because of, the God that Dennis Quaid serves, right? Like, not even the Harvey character, but the capital, the shareholders, which are mentioned.
Yeah.
Whether or not that could have been there could have been stronger emphasis on that system, that I could critique that system and where it was. For me, it felt like positioned enough where we are in a world where I'm like, I understand how the filters offered to a child who will never even see this amount of wealth, could never even reach this class, is being affected by this reality. And how shocking that is, that it's such an isolated reality. Like you're saying, we're seeing what, like, she's not necessarily a capitalist class, but this is like you're like, this is not the percentage that most people are experiencing. Yeah. She's looking out in this grandeur of wealth with this insane apartment, so isolated, doesn't have, all we want is for her to be able to go on that date with Fred, like that becomes, and I thought the film did a great job of, like, amidst all the horror, to me, the most horrific scene was her trying to leave the house to go on this date with, if you're remembering, with this man, Fred, who kind of is the closest to normal. He did know her as a kid. They went to school together. He's like, you're still as beautiful as you were. And just, she can't even get, like, to me, there was the bones popping out, all this. The most horrific thing is that feeling, because I've been there, where you're like, I'm not allowed, because of an invisible force that I have no control over, that really has nothing to fucking do with me. It's been here. The Hollywood star is there from the beginning to the end. Like, it will outlast my human being, my human vessel. But there's an invisible force, an invisible cage keeping me from leaving this house. And I do think that that's universal for all of us, because this level of whiteness, this cage of whiteness, this cage of, like, the desire capital that you were talking about, like, pretty privilege, the same way that like, the billionaires' reality, like, all of that shit is intended there to be a cage upon all of us.
Yeah.
You know, that to me was like, okay, I can see how, and I was this second watch like, where is the working class? Like, where are the people of color? And there is one shot at the top, which I thought was pretty brilliant, of like, Elizabeth is sitting there at her, like, I guess her desk. She has like very little furniture, but like there's one thing that's sort of her desk where she like reads the paper. And then behind her is a cleaning woman, probably of the same age, completely not in this, probably you're like not thinking about any of the things that this woman is thinking about, like, can I make enough at this gig, whatever those concerns are. And yet I was struck by that image because that this shit is going to trickle down because of the structures of capitalism and patriarchy.
Yeah.
So I thought there was something there that just touched my heart, where I'm like, these are the motherfuckers that fucking touched me at 4 years old and got their claws into me. And it actually was not like, the self-hatred was not organic to me.
No.
That's capitalism. And the power of that to put that in all of us is so, and that's why I was like, that monster at the end, I agree with you, was so empathetic and so beautiful, because in some ways it was the truest. It's like, this is what comes out after all of that stuff that you think is covering it, is helping. It's not. And it's so heartbreaking, because it would be a lie to sit here and say I was immune to any of it.
And I acknowledge that, like, I think the part of me that is like my desire to reject it, I think comes from the extent of my like participation in that culture that I don't want to own, that I still don't want to, like, my desire to be like, but I'm a good white lady. like I think that often my desire to be like, fuck this, comes from a place of like not wanting to admit the extent of my identification.
Of course. Yeah.
And and the other times we see the hint of a working class is like when the star is getting cleaned.
Yes.
Whoever drives the star cleaner at the end, that's a working class person.
And I have to imagine Fred potentially, but like, I actually loved that we never got to meet him, that there never got to be those moments. I loved how isolated she stayed. Yeah. Because that's the true horror of it. And that what it revealed was just, to me, how the isolation plays such a massive role, because I think also part of what you're saying, Kate, is like, our desire to fight is so important, and we do have to fight those things. We have to talk, and this can be part of the fight, but solo. And to have to, I find in the wake of like the reality of Ozempic, the reality of whatever all of those things mean, I have to go back to remembering that all of this shit is not about the individual people and the individual choices. And it's so hard because capital wants me to do that, and I'm trained to do that. Like, the moralizing, like, they want us to, and I thought this movie touches on this too. Like, they want us to, it's all about the moralizing of beauty standards. So thin, you're morally better. He says it at one point to her of like, he says to her that you're pure of heart. That's kind of like the assumption of, and to me, that was such a great example of like, yeah, we assume there, no matter who you fucking are in this culture, we know thin is meant to equate to like morally superior, whether on the levels of you're buying into it or you
thin
actually
and white.
Thin and white.
Yeah.
And yeah, that shit is so, and so I have to keep catching myself alone. If I think this is my fight with myself, it's so easy to be like, well, if I do Ozempic, don't Ozempic, it's your fuck. I can't believe you're doing that. I can't believe, and then I'm like, fuck, I got caught in the thing again. And it's like, and it's actually like, I gotta have that empathy for anyone who's in this. It's not about the thing. It's about the fact that it's trying to control these more, and it's such a mind fuck. And if it wasn't, we wouldn't be like, it wouldn't be so hard.
Yeah. And I love, like, I feel like Monster Elisa Sue, when you're like, in the first like 6 months of recovery, and you're like, oh fuck, I have to look at who I actually am. And because you've been spending so much time, the other thing I loved about this movie was the literal separation of desirable self and undesirable self, and the fact that she literally builds a dark windowless room in which to like stash undesirable self. I was like,
so
this is delicious. the monster Elisa Sue, it's like when you're continuously numbing with like short-term dopamine hits that are hurting you, and potentially that activity is creating an artificially gorgeous self and a self that is super shiny and attractive to other people, and bringing them in and bringing them in and bringing them in, when like your true self is either shut into a windowless room, or like when you finally start integrating again, it's like a horrific orgy of all of your disgusting parts. And so when Monstro Elisa Sue like hulked onto the scene, I was like, a baby. She's just a little baby. And I just like loved her.
Loved her.
And I loved how during election week, there was this great meme going around of that shot of Monstro Elisa Sue, like first when she's, oh my God, the part where she's putting her earrings on and putting the dress on. I was just like, this is the most tender and funny thing I've ever seen. Mm-hmm. But there's that at the end of that, when she's all ready and she takes one last look at herself in the mirror, and her face is like, and she's wearing her pretty dress and her jewelry, and she's got one eyeball up here and a titty over here and another face on her back. And after election week, people were posting that and having her like, she was wearing an I voted sticker.
I didn't see that.
I was like, yeah, that's it. That's it.
She just wants to participate. She just wants to be part of it.
I'm here. I'm doing my part, you know? Ugh,
Oh
I love
my
Monster
God.
Elisa Sue. I love that she
Frank,
pukes at
get
the
in
tit.
here. I'm sorry.
We've been gabbing.
No. This is exactly what I wanted this conversation to be. I wanted to
As the white man in the room, you are in charge. You orchestrated this.
That is true.
Can you give us insight into the Quaid character, please?
Daniel Quaid.
Yeah, I can speak
Quaid,
on
what is
Daniel
his
Quaid.
name?
Dennis Quaid.
Dennis Quaid.
Frank,
Harvey,
do you remember
right?
seeing him speak he came to our college to speak once. Do you remember
That's right,
that?
he did, yeah.
Wild.
Yeah.
I know.
Gave some real bullshit answers, as I recall.
Yeah, but how great was he in this for this casting? I mean,
what's your best advice for a young actor? And he's like, well, you're going to want to find an agent. Like, fuck off, Dennis Quaid.
And then someone shot him with a blow dart and he passed out.
I was actually just going to turn to the Dennis Quaid character.
yeah.
Because I'm curious, because this is an anti-capitalist podcast. This movie is so loaded with ideas about the female experience, dealing with the beauty industry, beauty standards, the literal body horror it takes to maintain these Eurocentric beauty standards that have been set for everyone unfairly, the entertainment industry. I really appreciate it. And where I would imagine Coralie's politics get fairly radical is that she did make the choice of making the shareholders sort of like this repeated theme that Harvey keeps bringing up. He's like, we got to do it for the shareholders. It's the shareholders. It's like, I think he relinquishes or like abdicates responsibility a couple times. And he's like, it's not me. I'm not making these decisions. It's the shareholders, which is like, in one sense true, but he is also, complicit in maintaining this system. Mm-hmm. And then the introduction of the shareholders at the end is just like this gaggle of old white men just skipping after all of the dancers. I really appreciate it because I feel like in lesser hands, it could have just been like, well, this is Hollywood, baby. And, you don't get much else other than that. But understanding that there is like an ownership class at the top that is dictating these terms. And I mean, let's be real. Like, I'm sure these old white men aren't thoughtfully, intelligently, or strategically trying to reinforce these beauty standards that we are talking about, but they are so ingrained in our culture. I can't speak to how we got here at this place, but how it's now that the system has been codified, it is then reinforced. So I'm sure these guys are like, they don't necessarily, other than the fact that they think young women are attractive, I don't think they have much thought else other than why they keep being like, well, we got to go younger, we got to go hotter, we got to go thinner, we got to go whatever. I'm sure none of them are like, you know what I want to do is I want to maintain Eurocentric beauty standards for the rest of time, and I'm going to use my power and influence and place of ownership to reinforce that. It's just like, it's so ingrained in just who they are as well. So I thought on the anti-capitalist front, I really did like that. And as far as Dennis Quaid goes, I mean, great casting. He did the performance that Coralie wanted him to do, which is just like completely, I'm not going to say it's good, but it was what she wanted, which is like completely over the top, just disgusting looking. I love the way she shoots men. I love the way she shoots men in this movie. She makes every single man, other than Fred. Fred gets like a little bit of like a softer lens, but every man looks they look like fucking goblins. They're like putrid looking, like just all face. I don't know what kind of like fisheye lens she's using, but like that first shot of Dennis Quaid in the bathroom with his just his, I don't want to be mean to Dennis Quaid, but he's like, he's like a bloated. I think he's gotten some work. Like the way his face looks is just repulsive, and she manages. It's crazy. Yeah. So he serves a very important function to this story. And just to touch on, I know you both were going back and forth a little bit, but to touch on, I don't know, Kate, how you were saying that the movie doesn't have any empathy towards these characters. I agree. And my read of it is that this movie is a tragedy, and not that you can't have empathy for a character in a tragedy. Like, obviously, Shakespeare has a lot of empathy for Hamlet or Othello or what have you. But I think what you both said about that, this is a story about self-hatred and how that manifests in a physical way. I felt in the story that she was telling, she showed as much empathy that she could for Elizabeth and Sue, because of basically the forces that are outside of their control, which is this capitalist patriarchal entertainment system. So I totally understand why as a viewer, you're like, oh, it's a bummer that like she wasn't as kind to her characters. I feel like by dint of the story, she was just showing what this system does to people. And I don't know if there was like a kinder way to tell that story.
No, I think you're totally right. And I think any weirdness I have around Coralie is probably just envy. That she's like maybe a little hotter than me and like gets to make movies, which is something I'm sort of discovering I want to do. Yeah, I think that's probably just my personal shit, because I do think she made an incredible movie. And also this is a I'm really working right now to parse my feelings from my thoughts, and I'm not amazing at it yet. So often I'll get really far down into a critique that I think is well reasoned, but is actually purely about my personal beef.
I never do that.
That is like older than this movie. You know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure.
Because I do agree with you, and it can be read as a cautionary tale about what happens to a person who allies themselves with power when power does not actually give a shit about them. Like that is something that Elizabeth does. But I also think that and that a lot of women do. But I also think and I think that the movie does have empathy for her. Like in that bathroom scene, I was watching when she's rubbing the makeup off, I was watching, and all I wanted for her to do was to go on her date. Like I was in agony. I felt for her very deeply, and I felt for Sue.
Yeah, that's even from my experience, that was the toughest scene to watch in a film of like the most ridiculous, over the top, campy, disgusting body horror.
Yeah, which is pretty brilliant.
That one and the scene where Sue is like beating her to death. That one was really hard to watch.
That's tough. Yeah, that's really tough.
But I was also like, I get it. Been there. Have tried. Yes. So yeah, I think this is why I was like, I had some feelings about coming on and talking about this movie, because I was like, I'm going to be messy. I just know I'm going to be messy. I'm going to say things, then I'm going to walk them back.
Good.
Like this movie makes me feel.
Yeah, but let's normalize being that kind of messy, because I think the dangerous thing is so many people are like, this is thought, and can never even recognize like how hard that is, or even just come back to something that they've named and be like, you know what? I've said this before in the podcast, speaking in draft, like actually I've changed my mind, because it turns out I realized I was deeply feeling, my thoughts have changed, as have my feelings. It's totally fine.
Because the mandate from our culture, like the capitalist mandate is define who you are and never change, unless it's to become better, in a very narrow definition of better.
Frank, I think with just what you said about point of view is really interesting, because as you were saying it, I was like, I feel like the point of view of the whole film, which is really hard to do, is pretty close to like, I felt like I was watching the whole movie from the perspective of the Hollywood star. Just like totally powerless, watching late stage capitalism, and none of it is empathetic. Like, we reach her at, what I love about Elizabeth is like, we reach her at the point where you're like, you've already made all the deals with the devil. Like, there's no, you can see, you're like, this isn't your first foray with like fucking taking something for beauty. You've had work done. Like, this is, we've met you at your last stop, and we can all relate to that. Like, whatever you've engaged with, because we're all part of this, we're all in this system. So I kind of liked, actually, now that you're naming that, like, I kind of liked how cold it was, and how, and you were talking about, Kate, the distance of the camera. I think I loved those choices. And yeah, the warmest we get is with our dear little monster at the end, which I want a cuddly version.
I think she is a cuddly version.
I want like a little softie, you know what I mean? Like,
I think she's probably pretty squishy. I think she's a squishy
you could
baby.
Squeeze her and an eye pops out. That would be fun.
Yeah, you might give her a hug though, and then get bitten in a place that you didn't think you could get bitten. That might happen.
Totally.
Speaking of like emotions and the conversation that we're having, I think it is a real testament to this film and to Coralie that this film is so powerful to like elicit so much, you know? And like, and I agree with you, Kate. We're not gonna come down on movie good, movie bad, but like there is so much here that is so evocative and compelling and powerful, and I think that is the testament to really great art for me, at least. And I think I think for me, the fact that I didn't want to watch it again is also very compelling and evocative, and says something about the inherent power of this film.
I wanted to touch really quick on, just as we were talking about casting, just I thought the brilliance of casting Demi Moore. And just the awareness, again, the awareness of like everyone coming to this, our experience being products of Hollywood for, wherever you are, however you've been touched by it. But like celebrity, how much celebrity and Hollywood is, like, you don't escape it if you're an American. And I've been it's just kind of really, that idea has really come to the forefront, watching people on Red Note, hearing people be like, no, I really thought it was like we saw, it's not High School Musical, it's not. And that is our main propaganda, that like that is what's been put forward. And to burst that bubble also tells us like, yeah, we're receiving the same propaganda. So like Demi Moore, as a child, just like what a metaphor of having seen her in striptease. Like, again, she's a figure that you grew up being like, this is an emblem of beauty. And then she had her moments of like, she appeared pregnant on a magazine, nude, and that was a big thing. And then her shaving her head in G.I. Jane, I remember like her being masculine and that being thought of as she was kind of on the forefront of this, just who she is. We know she's so like, and then her relationship with Ashton Kutcher. And I remember her being one of the first women that you would hear like, oh, she looks so young for her. Like, you want to age like Demi Moore. You want to age like it was just so, and so how fucking great to have her star in this film, and how empowering to have her be able to go out there and talk about this and give a killer fucking performance.
Yes.
But with such depth
So
and like,
much.
I can't imagine another actor. And then Margaret Qualley also just being this, her mother was an actress, but also up and coming, but also sort of, I loved that they used prosthetics on her. Those are not her boobs. That's not
those
her butt.
boobs.
And I love that. I loved that because it was just like, it sort of allowed for that experience. Just like, no one's going to reach this no one's gonna reach this thing. It was just that revealing of like, is this her body? Like, no, it's fucking not. This is no one's fucking body. As opposed to getting someone and saying, yeah, this is the, who has more of that figure, but obviously probably has had a trainer and worked and like trying to still play that game. I love that the choice was made to be like, we're not gonna play that game. We're gonna call it what it is, fucking prosthetics for the sake of like this fucking unobtainable figure. I love the casting in that. I thought it was spot on. And also Daniel Quaid. Daniel Quaid.
Renowned American actor, Daniel Quaid. Yeah, the thing about the fake boobs, I love it so much. One of the ways that I kind of started to heal my relationship to like wearing makeup and getting dressed up and yada, 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 to take it out of the realm of the compulsory was basically to queer it and be like, it's drag. I'm just doing drag tonight. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to do drag for this audition because this character is a drag character. Or I'm going to do drag when I go out tonight because I don't want to be, I want to be this entity. I want to be this creature. And when Sue is looking at her body in the mirror, it's such a great draggy moment of like, and I'm wondering about Margaret Qualley's experience inside of it. But if I had basically dragged out my form to like edit the things that continuously root me in reality, and it happens too when you put on like an incredible face, mm-hmm. and then you just get lost kind of being like, whoa, is this me? And I felt like she really had that moment in the movie when she's first checking out her newly youthful body. It was just such a drag moment that I loved, where she was just like fully feeling the fantasy.
And just to name, it's definitely the European whiteness, but they're definitely playing on like that body aesthetic coming from like the Kardashian, coming from like the appropriation of like bodies that are not white and pulling what aesthetics we like and not like, just like that was aware that was in there too.
It felt very 90s supermodel to me, of like incredibly tall, but with great tits.
Great tits. But I don't think they would let butts like that in the 90s. It was a great fake ass too.
I'm pretty sure that is Margaret Qualley's butt.
No, fake ass.
It's Nort? Wow.
Fake ass as well.
Fake
Wow.
ass.
Nice.
Yeah, it's a beast of an ass. She's a very different body than that. And I thought that was pretty brave as well, because like for her to also go out there and be like, this is so accentuating what I am, quote unquote, not, in terms of her career and being seen.
Well, but I love Margaret Qualley because she broke out in that Kenzo ad where if you haven't seen it, you should look it up. Margaret Qualley, Kenzo.
Oh, I have the dancing. She's a great dancer.
She's a great dancer, and she's also so she can make her face dance, which I think is such a cool quality. And also that ad, I was like, oh, this is a little freak. She's a little freak. And I think she really shines when she gets to be freaky, and she gets to be really freaky in this movie.
I did read one interview with her where she was saying that when they shot the Pump It Up scene,
yeah,
the highly overly sexualized dance aerobics class, that she like had a really hard time and like broke down on set because she was like, I've never performed this level of like public sexuality in such a revealing way before. No, I really I think she's fantastic.
And that was shot, I know we talked about how those scenes were shot, but it felt like, to me, the opposite of the Euphoria effect. It felt so distant that you were just able to see it for what it was, for like a plastic ass, for like nobody's body parts were theirs, and that everyone, regardless of who was on that stage, had to remember, this theme of like, respect the balance, which both Sue and Elizabeth are kept told. Like, well, that's how you maintain it. That's how you survive it. You respect the balance. Is so a theme that I think is put on to individual, like anyone in this system is like, No, it's up to you to respect the balance. Like, oh, are you caring too much about your looks? Well,
it's really giving
take a little self-care. Yeah.
It's really giving wellness culture.
Totally.
I will say, because Kate, you had mentioned like male gaze during those like pump it up, almost like shot like advertisement scenes. And yes, that is there. But even as a hetero cis man who is attracted to women, I found in watching those pump it up scenes, like I've never been more repulsed by tits and ass before. Truly, it's like she finds a way to shoot like the commodification of bodies and the commodification of meat, like because there's so much also like food and chicken and meat and like her just smashing all these things that like they're one and the same, and she shoots them in this way that reminds you that the way we're commodifying these bodies is the same way we commodify meat on these cooking shows or in these cookbooks or in your kitchen or what have you. And in a way, I don't know how she does. I truly don't know how she does it in a way that, like, even as a male viewer, I'm like, this is disgusting to me. This is too much. This is over the top. I hate the way that these bodies are being like laid out on a platter for us to feast on, and it's so in your face. So it's like almost like a male gaze on steroids, if that makes sense.
Yeah, super skillful. And there was such a small beat, but I just thought as a director was so fucking smart and under you know, the male gaze, which I think can be a female director, male, like that's just the term.
Yeah.
Where the first girl who comes into audition for like the part that Sue eventually gets, they only show her ass. They just show the commentators talking about like, I wish her face was like her boobs, or boobs were where her nose is or something. Just the choice to not show that actor at all, I think was so spot on, because it doesn't even give us a fucking instant to start to think, well, you know, maybe like they're right. Like I kind of see, you know, none of that. No, it's just like, this is, and that's what I mean. Like we're looking through the lens of like the objective kind of reality that a sidewalk would be staring at this truth.
She does keep like the blame where it lies.
Yes.
Like
definitely.
Like I do think that the men are symbols of the structure that is dehumanizing and punishing. And they are like mouthpieces of the structure that is dehumanizing and punishing.
Yeah, and it would have been easy to be like, well, if we're going to empathize with, then we should, and no one gets it.
Yeah, she was like, we shan't. We simply shan't. Mm-mm. And I think that's very courageous. But, and also maybe I just struggled with, I know very intimately the feeling of like, I know this is bad for me and I know I need to stop, but I can't. Mm-hmm. And perhaps part of because the more we're talking about it, I'm like, the movie does have a lot of empathy for Elizabeth and Sue. Why didn't I think it did? And I'm like, well, maybe I was unwilling to be empathetic to them because I was not yet willing at the time I saw the movie to be empathetic to that in myself. You know, that powerlessness to stop behaviors that are killing you.
It's totally, I mean, when she screams like you've got to get control, and the fact that she's talking to herself is just, it shook me to my core. I think it's something that's so hard to grapple with in addiction, but also the addiction to capital. Like if we're talking about the addiction to capitalism, it's the thing that makes it so hard to realize like powerlessness doesn't mean I can do anything about it. It means I need something greater than me. In the case of, you know, anti-capitalism, I think consistently the solution is organizing. It's a group around an idea. It's never like, you, sir, like just here's how you have to think alone and you can fix it. You need to alone get off Amazon and fix it. This is a moral issue, you know, and that makes it, I think, the hardest to grapple with, because fuck, I wish it could just be as simple as like things I could control on my own and you know, berate myself for engaging in capitalism. And, you know, I think that's where there's nothing unethical. I do wish this is one version of a movie. I think it's so much, I think it's real. We have less movies that give us the example of like, this to me is so clear about revealing what we as people, as human beings, but as women, as whatever human beings in this system, in these beauty standards, what we give up to exist, which is ultimately life, you know, very often.
Yeah.
I think I want to see more movies where it's like really grappling with the fear of like, what do we have to give up in order to change the system? Like, you know, and that might be like
we have to give up our addictions.
Exactly. And how? And like those movies that grapple with like, this is about like what the addiction is, and this is about like you don't have any control. And like I think I'm just like looking for those, and I think it's a much harder thing to do of like the moving past it. Like once you realize there you can like that journey of like past it is a harder thing to grapple with because there's so many less examples of it.
Which is why I think I love films that quote unquote like stay in the solution. Like I just saw All We Imagine Is Light. God, I love movies about healing. Like those are my favorite films. And All We Imagine Is Light is one of those movies where you're like, and now we are going to look at the ocean for 20 seconds. and well, it does this thing that like poetic cinema does. Like Andrea Arnold does this in her work a lot, where like, and my roommate pointed this out to me, and I've been obsessed with this ever since, this idea. But like a character will have an emotional experience, and then the camera will cut to a shot of the natural world that perfectly symbolizes, like puts you, the viewer, right into the emotional space that the character is in.
Right. And there's nothing natural world about this
No,
movie.
It's sterile.
I think the closest you get is the fly, you know, the fly in the glass of wine, which we sit on, but like, yeah, you're desperate for a natural world shot. And there's late stage capitalism. It's just tried us all of it.
And back to your point about celebrity, like celebrities are our gods now.
Yeah. 1,000%.
You look at the notion of God in a recovery framework, and it's like God is the thing in you that loves. God is the thing in you that seeks community. God is the thing in you that knows that you're not alone and wants to make that real. God is the thing in you that, like, yeah, it's that feeling of like, someone can help me carry this. And I think that, like, you know, you look at a God like Jesus, and that God was born of struggle. Like, I think gods are stories we tell ourselves to. I mean, this is a Marxist thing, and I think he's right, but I don't think he needed to be such a dick about it. But the idea that,
well, he was really drunk all the time.
He was
probably
so
going to be.
He was drunk. Marx, honey, I get it. It really sucks, but like, you fell prey to it too. God damn it. Stop drinking, baby. But like, I think gods are the way we make sense of things that are beyond our understanding.
Totally.
And like, you look at the pure character of something like Jesus, and he was like prostitutes and beggars are like the people we must help, because if we help them, we will help everyone in society. Hello. He's a commie. Like, he was a god born of a struggle story. And the Greeks and Romans had pantheons because they externalized all of their emotions into different gods, and then reasoned out their difficulties through stories of these gods fighting each other. And now what we have as a culture is the gods we deserve, which are like human beings trapped in the fantasies that we project onto them. And like,
The Gods We Deserve is a great title for a film you should write and direct, Kate.
Yeah.
I think someone's probably already made a movie called The Gods We Deserve. And like, the notion that capitalism creates addiction is not a new notion either. But I do think that a God structure can help a society stay connected to its soul. And unfortunately, like, the Christian God has been hijacked by a bunch of Nazis. So, or that happened a long time ago. Whatever, I'm rambling. But my point is that, like, I think your point about celebrity is really apt, because like we have made gods out of humans in our society, and it routinely kills them. Like, yeah.
Well, it's probably time to give this movie some awards. I feel like
I think so.
we'll have to have you back on, Kate, because we could keep
Shooting the shit.
shooting it. But let's go to our first award. Best Politics goes to the character with the best politics in this movie. Oof, tricky.
I also want to say, even though we are giving this movie awards, which feels antithetical to the entire conversation that we just had, just want to underline that this is just for fun. This is just for funsies, okay?
Just for funsies, okay?
This is just for funsies, okay?
Yeah, I hope not too much of this podcast is me equivocating, because I feel like I did a lot of that this conversation.
Well, I think this is the medium for that, to be honest.
Yeah.
Jeez, best politics.
Best politics.
Not a lot of characters.
Whoever owns that diner that she went to.
If I'm going to stretch that far, I'd say the cleaning lady, probably. Most likely the one working class person we saw.
Yeah, the one.
Probably, but we don't know their politics.
We really don't know.
Wow, it's pretty...
Fred? But he doesn't have politics. He's just
politics.
he's just nice.
You know, I'm going to say the closest we get, I think, is Elizabeth, who I know is Sue, but Elizabeth has a... can we give it to the monster?
Monster Elisa Sue!
Monster
Elisa Sue. There it is.
Yeah.
Because the Monster Elisa Sue gets to a point of, I'm going to put my little earring on regardless.
She's like, I deserve to take up space. Look at my pretty dress. Here's a breast that I just puked out.
And she
now
does choose to
fuck all
put
y'all.
Elizabeth's face back on, which I think she never gets there, but the tragedy is that she's sort of, we see Elizabeth understand the part of her that is still there, understand like, this isn't worth it. And yet it's the powerlessness. She can't. It's too set in. So there's something there that there is a politic desperate to come out that is being born in the horror of this, which I think a lot of great politics are born in the horror of this reality and the recognition of it. It just, she comes out as monster Elisa Sue.
And then she drenches all the suits in
blood. Yeah,
a
that
swimming
deserves.
pool's level of blood.
Fuck yeah. Monster
Yeah.
Elisa Sue gets
Monster
best
Elisa Sue.
politics. Okay, there it is.
Okay, our next award is Worst Politics, goes to the character with the worst politics. So do we give this to Dennis Quaid as Harvey because he's like the avatar of toxic
of the suits,
of capitalist patriarchy?
Yeah.
Or do we give it to the shareholders because they are in fact the owners?
They are the owners, and we do meet them.
Or do we give it to Elizabeth because her politics destroy her?
No. I don't blame I don't blame Elizabeth for anything that happens to her. I think she is as we said, she is struggling through this system and the tolls that the system takes on her.
And I think she needs to take accountability for some things, for some choices that she's making. That's all I'm saying. I'm saying.
And I feel like she's like almost, I feel like she's there.
She's getting there. Because Elizabeth is Monster Elisa Sue.
Yeah. So I think she's getting there. Yeah, I would give it to the shareholders because we do meet them. And I love and I appreciate that they're there. Again, a different filmmaker could have just not even put them there. And they are there in a film that doesn't have a lot of characters, which means there is a politic there.
I'm a little inclined to lean toward Dennis Quaid because he chews with his mouth open.
Yeah, just for that shrimp shit. Ugh.
Not a movie to watch if you have misophonia, let me tell you that.
No.
Yeah, I mean, if we were looking at it from like a societal, bird's eye view, we'd have to go shareholders. But because of the story of this movie, I think you're right. Dennis Quaid
and because it's Dennis Quaid.
And it's because it's Dennis Quaid, and because he actually in real life has terrible politics.
I'm trying to do the camera angle that we meet him.
It's actually pretty good.
That's really good.
He does a lot of it's a lot of face down too, and just
Wow. Yeah, he has such bad politics and really made good use of them in this role. Mm-hmm. All right, and our last award goes to Better Supporting Character. Who's the character in this movie that we think it should actually be about, that we want to see it from the angle of? I mean, I think it would be cool to see it from a working class, like the whole this whole vision just from
The cleaning lady.
She's like, comes in. She's like, what the fuck?
No, literally, it's just a bunch of her coming into the like increasingly trashed apartment and being like, I don't know what this lady does. I don't know what problems she has. And then we cut back to her at her apartment, and she's like, I don't know if it's worth it because I work for the richest lady and she's a mess. I don't know what's going on with her. Like,
It'd be fucking
she's
great
having
too
tea.
if it's like she goes here and we're like, wow, we saw this movie. It follows up. We're like, this is from her angle, and then she just goes to the next house and it's the exact same. And the next, it's just like
someone else is
this
having an
is
absolute
how
crisis.
all these white celebrities are just like all having. It's like that class is
That's
just
really
like
I'm obsessed.
That's really good.
entirely. So for her, it's like day like any other. Like, yeah, no, that's what happens in
And the
this
title
world.
the title of that movie is The God We Deserve.
The God we deserve.
That's really good. I have just one other pitch, which is the little girl at the New Year's Eve show.
Ooh.
Because I felt like it was because that room is just filled with adults, but one little girl in a princess outfit, and that is so intentional. And I would love to learn what this experience does to her. Not does to her, but what she takes away from this experience. Because you get the idea that she's in a princess costume. She's already buying in.
She's that
to
4-year-old.
these
I'm so
beauty
glad you named
standards.
that.
But maybe Monster Elisa Sue saved her life because she walks out of that experience drenched in blood.
Yes. Yeah, and we all need, that's kind of, I guess, if there's that visionary positive thing, it's like more Monster Elisa Sue's fire hosing blood over this whole charade.
Yeah, there is something very like anti-capitalist to me in that ending. Like if the movie ended there, I would be like, oh yeah, metal. But then it ends with such an incredibly sad image. It probably is an anti-capitalist film. I mean, Coralie Fargé's French. They're like, the government's fucking up. Everybody stop working. Like
it's
every
on their
3
brand.
months.
Yeah.
We're also not trying to determine if the movie is anti-capitalist. We're just picking apart where the politics are and where they skew and where the anti-capitalist themes may lie. So it's not like we're not giving it like a Metacritic score.
I've misunderstood the podcast.
We have to start over.
Yeah, let's back to one. But yeah, no, there is. Well, there was another interview with Coralie where she was talking about how it is seeing Monster Elisa Sue with her mask off that causes the audience to freak out and riot.
Yeah.
And I think there's something there.
Amazing. Yes. Yeah.
So everyone has to get sober from their addictions, and then everything will solve itself.
Well, it's funny that we actually didn't really talk about aging much. I think probably because it's like the most obvious theme of this film is just like, but I think you named it right there for what it is. It's like the horror, the graphics of horror were actually not that far from just fucking aging. Like the gray hair, the like, veins. And it was just, it puts in our face exactly what you're like, what us as a society been put in a position to fear ourselves the most. And who does that benefit? Who does that benefit if we get wrapped up in that and we fear ourselves the most? It only benefits capital and power. And like, that's kind of the moral.
Yes, exactly. It's constantly encouraging us to deny reality because the reality it has created is unbearable.
And just last question for you, because we got to wrap it up. But is Monster Elisa Sue, is that the name or did you coin that?
Her name is Monstro. Monstro, Elisa Sue.
It's so cute.
They do a title card.
Oh, they do. Okay, I missed that. That's right. Oh my god.
That was one of my favorite. That was one of the moments of the movie that I laughed the hardest when the title card for Monster Elisa Sue came up.
Elisa Sue is also such a lovely.
Yeah.
It's
the
so
other
sweet.
thing about this movie is that it is so funny.
So funny.
And Coralie said that is one of the ways that she makes horror digestible is by making it very funny, which I mean, love.
The camp in this film is next level.
Yes.
It's a real achievement in tone, in everything.
And just empowering to fucking see any movie that takes horror, a genre that has been so horrific to women, caused, and the female body, and re-empower it, where you're just like, yeah. All right.
So we're wrapping up. We're going to have you back because this is too much fun. But before we do wrap, we like to talk with our guests as artists and people just about one practice that maybe at this moment that it could be an anti-capitalist practice, a leftist practice, whatever you want to discuss that you're that's happening in your life right now.
I'm in recovery. And I won't get too deep into that, but if anyone wants to talk to me about it, DM me on Instagram. The other thing I'm doing, though, because I'm trying to stop my cycles of numbing and distraction, is I'm going to the library a lot.
Oh, yeah.
And y'all, the New York Public Library
is sick, yeah.
Who knew? Probably a lot of people. A lot of people knew. I didn't,
but not
really
enough.
know.
Not enough people know.
Like, yeah, and it's a quiet space. I've taken into the habit of like looking up if the book I want is at my local branch. And if it's not, you just say like, can you move it to this branch? And they do. And then they tell you when it's ready. Or sometimes if I want to do a little day trip and I look up the branch where the book is and it's beautiful, I like go to that part of the city and then I get like a little biscuit and I go into the beautiful other branch and I read the book for a while and then I check it out. And because I think reading like radical history right now is really, really calming because everything has happened before and everyone has gotten through it. And there are a lot of really smart people who lived before us who dedicated their entire lives to liberation. And they all wrote books.
That's so beautiful.
That's a really good one.
Yeah.
Mutiny by Peter Mertens, which I referenced in my bio, is just a great look at contemporary geopolitics. And the subheader of that book is How the World is Tilting. And it's a really well laid out argument for the fact that capitalism is actually dying. And workers the world over, and especially in the global South, are really starting to reject the East-West hegemony that keeps them enslaved, basically.
Dope. Just
That's
added it to my reading list.
Yeah, and then those Becky Chambers books are great. They're a genre called solar punk, which is basically a future fantasy where human beings figure it out, and they create societies that are sustainable. So their problems become problems of purpose and philosophy.
That's cool.
Yeah, it's gorgeous.
Kate, thank you so much for being back with us.
Thank you for having me.
This is a really beautiful conversation. And we'll link to your work in the episode description if you want, so people can find you. Yeah.
Great. Yeah, just put my Instagram in there. Put my IMDb in there. IMDb.
Gotcha.
Yeah, do that. Yeah, thanks so much for having me. I love discussing film through this lens. So, which is deciding if a movie is anti-capitalist or not. That's the purpose of this
The decision
podcast.
must be made.
Yeah.
We won't
That is what
leave
we do.
until we decide.
To get ourselves a treat. Let's all go to the library.
Thank you all so much for listening. Make sure to follow us on Instagram and TikTok. And if you want to support the show and get access to our Patreon episodes, the link is in the episode description in your podcast player or at mvcpod.com.
Another reminder that we donate our ad space. So if you're part of a leftist or progressive organization, you would like to run an ad on this program, you can email us at moviesvscapitalism@gmail.com.
For next week, we'll be watching the 2024 Timmy Chalamet Bob Dylan biopic, A Complete Unknown.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
To get ourselves a treat. Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat.